Hello, wrestling fans. Ronald Ray here, your boy with a cornbread accent. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Classic Wrestling Reminiscing. I know I should be doing more of these because I really do like talking the old school stuff. Uh, this edition of Classic Wrestling Reminiscing, we're going to take a look at the Tales from the Territories episode, World Class Championship Wrestling, Wrestling's Lone Star Legacy is what they titled it. And what can you say about World Class Championship Wrestling that hasn't been said already? Especially dealing with the Von Erich family. There's actually a movie going to come out, I believe, December 22nd called The Iron Claw. It's got Zac Efron in it playing Kevin Von Erich. Seen a trailer for it a couple days ago. Looks amazing. So let's get right to it. But before I do, let me say that it will be greatly appreciated if you hit that subscribe button, notification bell, hit the like button. Other than that, let's let it rip. World Class Championship Wrestling began in 1966. At the time, it was known as NWA Big Time Wrestling. This, of course, went from 1966 to 1982. Jack Atkinson, who is better known as Fritz Von Erich, and a man by the name of Ed McLemore, who was the owner of the Dallas Sportatorium, bought out the Dallas Fort Worth Wrestling office, breaking away from the Houston Wrestling office, owned by and operated by Paul Bosch. Of course, Fritz Von Erich, he started wrestling around 1952. Didn't know this, he was actually trained by Stu Hart as well. But for a long time, he did a Nazi gimmick with a man by the name of Walter Paul Saber, otherwise known as Waldo Von Erich. Of course, they were a brother tag team doing the Nazi gimmick, very much hated. But in 1966, Fritz would turn babyface and feud with Gary Hart and whoever he could get to align with him. And this feud would probably last for decades and would actually involve his sons. In 1950, Fritz Von Erich, Jack Atkinson, were married a woman by the name of Doris Smith, and they would have 6 boys. The oldest one, Jack, who unfortunately, because of a freak electrocution accident, would pass away when he was like 6 or 7 years old. Then you had Kevin, David, Kerry, Mike, and Chris. They all wound up wrestling, and in one way, at one time or another, would feud with Gary Hart. I don't think Chris did, but I know the other ones would. But on this round table discussion, round table, you had Kevin Von Erich, the only surviving Von Erich brother, Brian Diaz, longtime friend of the Von Erichs and a wrestler himself, former wrestler Jimmy Garvin, when he was in World Class, he was known as Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. More about him later, but he would have feuds with David and Kevin, Chris Adams as well. Also, David Manning was there. He was a referee, helped promote, helped book. It almost seems like he was Fritz Von Erich's right-hand man. Excuse me. And rounded it out is Chavo Guerrero Jr. He was kind of acting as like a interviewee, or the guy, the person giving the interview, asking the questions. His dad, Chavo Guerrero Sr., of course, or some of you might know him as Chavo Classic, was a very respected, well-to-do wrestler himself. Great worker in his time. One of the first things they talked about was, Fritz Von Erich, and they, said he was a, okay guy. They didn't really bash him or anything. He said, I think it was Brian Diaz who said he would listen to the talent. He might not go with it, but he would actually sit there and at least listen to what they had to say. Manny and all them also mentioned, hey, he was tough, commanding respect, but he was honorable. They mentioned the names that went through World Class at one time, like Stan Stasiak, Blackjack Mulligan, Great Kabuki, some of the guys who were just cutting their teeth, like Rick Rude and the Dingo Warrior. Of course, Dingo Warrior grew up to become the Ultimate Warrior, and a few people who got their first start there, who started, first match on. A guy by the name of Texas Red, who grew up to become the Undertaker, and Cactus Jack Manson, who, of course, is Mick Foley. One of the talents they talked about was a guy by the name of Gentleman Chris Adams. A bunch of you probably don't know who Chris Adams is, but you've seen his finisher plenty of times. I think he was the one who started doing the super kick before anybody else. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he's the one who taught Shawn Michaels and Paul Diamond how to perform the super kick. Anyway, they all said guy was probably the nicest guys in the world. Definitely lived up to his name, the Gentleman. And that was, of course, until he started drinking. Diaz would tell a story how the two of them went to Juarez, Mexico, and they started drinking. Next thing you know, Adams is arguing with somebody, and there were only two gringos in there. Brian sees somebody pull a gun, they run out. The guy starts shooting at them. When they get back to the hotel, Adams, walked in, and there's Brian and Diaz right there, and just clocked him right in the face. Chris was like, "What'd you do that for?" It's like, you just going there arguing with people. And he would say that, when he woke up the next day, he had like no memory of it. They mentioned World Class was very popular in Israel because of the Israeli TV. One night, Chris Adams again gets in an argument at the bar, this time with a bartender. Adams would throw him down, the bartender run towards him, and he would give him a legit super kick, causing the bartender to lose the eye. Luckily, they was able to get him out of the country at the time. But, finally, authorities would catch up with him. And I actually remember vaguely about this situation. They was on a flight, it got delayed, and the attendants gave all the wrestlers free drinks. Well, Chris, as I say saying here, he didn't have to wrestle that night, so he just kept downing drinks, and finally the attendants cut him off, which was the worst mistake they can make. He had some not so nice things to say to the attendants. The pilot thought he was going to defend their honor, but he wound up getting headbutted for his troubles. They say he spent 6 months in a federal prison, and I do remember this because it was like all of a sudden Chris Adams leaves, shows up on UWF, and Black Bart suddenly became World Class Champion. Again, Chris was in UWF briefly, then all of a sudden he disappeared from there, then resurfaced again in the UWF, and started start out as tag team champions, start off tag team champions, Chris or Terry Taylor. Excuse me again. But had a little brief feud with Iceman Parsons, who was supposed to be his partner. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, the funny part of this whole scenario is Kevin left out the part, or they left out the part where him and Chris Adams changed T-shirts. They can fool the authorities, and Chris can sneak away from the airport. But it didn't happen. They went up to catch him, and like I said, he spent 6 months in federal prison. So now they kind of again talking about Kevin Von Erich. Best described probably the best athlete of the bunch. Kerry, of course, had the best body, was a machine in that gym. David, I think, unfortunately, we didn't get to see this, but apparently he's more of the business guy with all the brothers. He was about to be the NWA World Champion. He had travel through all the other territories. Check out some cool stuff if you want to. David Von Erich in Florida as a heel. Pretty good stuff. I think he would have made a really good world champion. Dude can work, tall, lanky guy. But unfortunately, we didn't see that happen due to his untimely passing more on that later, of course. But um, like I said, Kevin was a great athlete. He did high flying moves, one of the best drop kicks at the time. And apparently, all the Von Erichs were stiff as hell, especially Kevin Von Erich. Now, it's digress here to tell a kind of funny story about me personally. Um, I remember when I was a kid, first started watching wrestling. My parents already told me it was, please don't be offended, it was fake. So it's like, and of course, being a kid and even adult, I kind of take things a little too literally, not figuratively sometimes. Uh, but yeah, they was like, oh, this is fake. So one time I think he was wrestling Killer Khan or something like that, and yeah, somebody like that. And Kevin will wrestle barefoot. Uh, digress again. Apparently, he did have boots at one time. The rumor is one time he lost his wrestling boots and just quit wearing them after that. Apparently, Kevin Von Erich was one of these people who did not like wearing shoes at all, period. But anyway, back to my story. So, anyway, I'm watching a match with Kevin Von Erich, and I think it was Killer Khan or something like that. And all of a sudden, I mean, the camera's like right there, close up to him. Kevin just takes his foot and just BAM! Right upside the head. I'm like, Mom, Dad, y'all told me this was fake. There was nothing fake about that. But yeah, that was kind of the Texas style too. They I think everybody was stiff. Uh, and they told a story here where one night he was wrestling Buddy Roberts. And like I mentioned, he's wrestled barefoot. He got him down in the corner, was going to go for the iron claw, but wound up, I guess, called an audible and decided to kick Buddy in the mouth. But unfortunately, his foot caught a few of Buddy's teeth and wound up, gashing his foot open. They also tell another story, and it was funny. Kevin sitting there, right there, telling him, "It's like, look, I didn't, they told a story about him pulling his teeth out with a pair of pliers, or his tooth out with a pair of pliers." And he said, "Look, I wasn't doing that to be a tough guy. I was actually did that to be a wussy." There we go. That's because his tooth was hurting that bad. And speaking of Buddy Roberts, they were talking about the feud Von Erichs had with the Freebirds. Now, me personally, I think the first heel tag or heel faction, or heels I did like and cheer for, I knew I wasn't really supposed to. It was the Freebirds. I mean, they were just so cool. You had the wannabe rock star Michael Hayes, Terry Bam Bam Gory, badass son of a gun. And of course, you had Buddy Roberts, who was kind of the whipping boy, but man, he'll fight you tooth and nail as well. Um, and that, just that song, Bad Street USA, you hear that and you thought that was cool. I still say my number one pick for entrance music, as far as entrance music being made for a certain talent, Bad Street USA, after all these years, is number one in my book. Not the DX, not the NWO, not whoever. Bad Street USA, even tops Real American from Hulk Hogan. Best ring entrance music made for this certain wrestlers. Yeah, the best one. Anyway, of course they talk about how these guys party like rock stars. They, kick down doors from the, from the frame, bust up and burn hotel furniture or apartment furniture. Terry Gordy one time, drove a car through a glass and started urinating on everybody, and they're like, "Oh, we're sorry." I mean, because it was Terry Gordy. It was in Texas. Wrestling was, it in Dallas, and they were the top people. Of course, the Von Erichs were. But they describe how the feud started. There was a cage match between Kerry Von Erich and Ric Flair. Michael Hayes was like an enforcer referee. David Manning was the acting real official. Michael Hayes was, trying to help Kerry out. Kerry didn't want it. Michael Hayes like, okay, screw it. Or he winds up getting thrown out of the match. And as he's walking out the cage, Kerry, I guess, is trying to go up to him, say, hey, we still cool, whatever. That's when Ric Flair, nailed Kerry from behind with a knee, causing Kerry to bump into Michael Hayes. Kerry Gordy didn't like this, so he just took the cage and slammed it on Kerry's head. And this, of course, screwed Kerry Von Erich out of becoming world champion. Everybody probably politically thinking, hey, ain't no way Kerry Von Erich's going to lose, right? He's going to become new champion. But yeah, that's, like I said, that feud was a big moneymaker for them too. That's the one that kind of set everything on the map. Of course, the Freebirds drew money everywhere they went to. Louisiana Territory, Georgia, Florida, Texas, name it. They were always top stars. Had a very brief stint in the WWF, but I think Michael, they all pissed off Andre and they got fired. But they would have been so right at that moment with the Rock and Wrestling thing. Like I said, I say this again, Bash Street USA, kick-ass song as far as wrestling songs. But yeah, it was a hell of a time. Now they kind of talked about Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin for a minute here. Gorgeous Jimmy from Florida, got trained by the Grahams, I believe. Legit wrestler, I think it was a state high school wrestling champion. Friend of Mike, I believe, as well. And he said, hey, you want to be a wrestler? Of course, Jimmy Garvin, it's not really the brother of Ronnie Garvin, actually the stepson of Ronnie Garvin. He just wound up taking the name Garvin. But, he said a wrestler came up to him one time and he said, look, your look right now, you're not going to draw any money, kid. You got to come up with something different. So he, started fixing his hair a little more and started a little bit of strut, called himself Gorgeous Jimmy. First, he had a valet by the name of Sunshine, which was his legit cousin. Brought her in, from Florida to world class, where he was really, perfecting that gimmick. Then later on, he said, hey, I'm just going to bring my wife into this. And, his wife's name is Precious, or Patty, but they wound up naming her Precious. And what started the breakaway from Sunshine and Precious was there was a match, and Precious wound up tripping up Jimmy, but she blamed Sunshine, so Jimmy turned on Sunshine. Of course, this would, get Sunshine to bring in Kabuki, side with Chris Adams, help her in the feud. I think later on, after they left, they brought in John Tatum and Missy Hyatt. The feud with Sunshine and maybe Chris Adams or whoever. But yeah, they were kind of a trendsetters for the ballets, and actually using ballets more, than just walking down the ring and taking the jacket. They actually kind of involved in part of angles. So they were definitely revolutionary when it came to that. So yeah, even though World Class did do some revolutionary angles and storylines involving the women, of course the box office drawing Freebirds versus Von Erichs, and just the way they shot their television was very revolutionary. Unfortunately, truth is, most fans and other people, their legacy is this a cursed family and a cursed promotion? Like I said earlier, David was poised to become the World Heavyweight Champion, to beat Ric Flair in Texas Stadium for the Parade of Champions. But it later became the David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions because of his death in February of 1984. He would die from a acute enteritis. There's a documentary called Heroes of World Class. I'll put the link in the video that depicts, or details the passing of David Von Erich. Apparently, he had sharp pains in his side, went to Japan anyway. David was a big fan of Japanese food, especially sushi, ate a lot of it, and apparently that had a bad reaction to him, and wound up leading to his death. Uh, so that after that, they brought in Mike Von Erich, who supposedly didn't want to be a wrestler. He was smaller than Kevin, Kerry, and David, but he was wanting to be maybe more on the business side or producing side. But they needed a Von Erich in there, and he went in there and tried the best he can. Uh, but later on, he wound up getting a shoulder injury. Uh, then from that, got an infection called toxic shock syndrome, where you had like a over 103-degree temperature or something like that, and was close to death at that point. If you ever see footage of his interview from when he was in the hospital, when he was getting out the just beginning, recovery, you can see he was very frail and not all with it. Um, but he wound up making a comeback to the ring. Then you had Kerry Von Erich's motorcycle accident, which caused his foot to be amputated, and no, especially fans, none of us knew that happened. We knew about the motorcycle accident, of course, but we didn't know it had an amputated foot. And there was an interesting story about, I think, stories going around that none of the wrestlers really did. It was just a freak occurrence where he was in a match with Colonel De Beers. De Beers pulled the boot, and when he pulled the boot off because he wore special boot made for this prosthetic foot. He pulled that boot out, and there was no way it was a prosthetic, and a few fans in the front row got to see it, and I guess that kind of story. Not like I said, none of the fans really knew that I knew of until the internet came about, and they, and Kevin, of course, everybody corroborated the story that he wrestled for years, even when he was in the WWF as Texas Tornado. He was wrestling then with a prosthetic foot. But yeah, then you had Mike's suicide. Then, like I said, Kerry wound up going to the WWF. This World Class was really on his ass at the time. I believe during this time is when he sold to Jerry Jarrett and became USWA. I think he was there for a brief time, then he wound up going over there. Of course, in the beginning, World Class was an NWA territory. I think there was a falling out with, Jim Crockett didn't want to book Ric Flair, the world champion of Texas no more, so they wound up pulling out of the NWA, and I think it was around '86, and declared themselves the World Class Wrestling Association, and Rick Rude being their first world champion. And there's another one who, passed away way before, way too young. And I think he was trying to come back. Well, this is years later. But yeah, then you have, Kerry's, you had Mike's suicide and Kerry's suicide. Their younger brother, Chris Von Erich, who had asthma, it stunted his growth and caused his bones to be real brittle. And he so desperately wanted to be a wrestler, but just couldn't do it. I think one of the stories I heard, he broke his arm doing a drop kick, and that wound up leading up to his suicide. And not just the Von Erich, you had Gino Hernandez's death. You had Bruce Roberti, who was murdered in Puerto Rico. Bruce Roberti was a big star there. Like I said, like Jim Cornette said, all the toxic shock and motorcycle accidents, and of course they had their demons too, and the deaths, it was just too much. They had, bad angles, where I think Mike was just starting to come back, and Kerry had his motorcycle accident. They brought in a wrestler by the name of Ricky Vaughn, and said his name was Lance Von Erich. He was because of the Von Erich brothers, the son of Waldo Von Erich. But there was a falling out with Ricky Vaughn and Fritz. I think it was over money. Then Fritz said, Lance lied to us, he's a fraud and stuff like that. And apparently there's people going up to, I think, David Manning and said, hey, that's not no Von Erich, that's Ricky Vaughn. He was wrestling in Portland. And they really didn't had no rhyme or reason for that. Uh, then years later, they did a heart attack angle right before a match between Al Perez and Kerry Von Erich, where Fritz, had a heart attack, and that definitely didn't set well with fans. So there were some bad decisions that led to the falling of World Class Championship Wrestling. For me, I liked it. It was okay, but it was. Uh, I know should I feel bad about this? I don't know. Even as a kid, I wasn't that big of a fan of the Von Erichs, uh, especially if they were wrestling Freebirds or Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams. Uh, sometimes they had cool entrance music. Now, like I said, I was talking about the trailer came out and they're using Tom Sawyer for the music, so that was kind of cool. Hopefully they'll use Stranglehold as well. Uh, anyway, like I said, there's a documentary I will put on here called Heroes of World Class. It is on YouTube for free. You can watch it. There's another documentary about Chris Adams, and there's another one who had a tragic ending. Uh, but the documentary, the same people who did the Heroes of World Class did the Chris Adams documentary called Gentleman's Choice. I'm not sure it's on YouTube. I'll try to find it and put the link in the description as well. Other than that, that does it for me in this edition of Reminiscing, or Classic Wrestling Reminiscing. Hope you folks enjoyed. If you did watch, thank you for watching. For all the people who subscribe, thank you for subscribing. If you're about to subscribe, you're a champ. Thank you for that. And other than that, you folks have a good one. Take it easy. Thank you for checking out my video. I really do appreciate it. And of course, this is the part where I ask you, if you're not a subscriber yet, to click on that subscribe button, leave a like, also share with friends. And if you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter, X, it's at RRPATRPTV46. On Facebook, it's this Ronald Ray. And yes, I need to turn in my man card because I do have a TikTok. You can find me on TikTok at RP2Vision. As always, you have a good one. Take it easy.